Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining today's session. I'm Christy Fram. I'm the manager of the mentoring program as part of the Drought Resilience Leaders Mentoring Program, proudly delivered by the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation. I'd like to start today by acknowledging that we meet on different lands across Australia, and I welcome everyone from whichever part of Australia you are joining us today. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands on which we meet, work and live, and recognise that this land has always been and always will be Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander land. We recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. This webinar forms part of the Drought Resilience Leaders Program, proudly led by the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation, in partnership with a number of other organisations, including the National Farmers Federation. And you might have heard from one of our team members, Christy, who is also working in this program. She is with the National Farmers Federation as a consortia partner, the Foundation for Rural and Regional Renewal, the Rural Economy Centre of Excellence, the Australian Resilience Centre and the University of Southern Queensland. We truly value the working relationships we have with these organisations and value their work across rural and regional Australia. The Drought Resilience Leaders Program is funded by the Australian Government's Future Drought Fund. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for taking time out of your day for this, the third of the national webinar series as part of the Drought Resilience Leaders Program. We'd love you to introduce yourselves and tell us where you're zooming in from today, which country you're on, where in Australia you are. Please let us know and say hello in the chat box. This session is being recorded and will be available on the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation website later today. So if you would like to go back and watch it again, or if you'd like to share it onto somebody else, please do so. If you have any questions during the session, please add them to the Q&A box that you can find a link for down along the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to get to those and answer them at the end. We certainly would love to hear your questions along the way. So I'll hand over to our facilitator very soon, Jasmine. Very, very pleased to have Jasmine Boxall facilitating today's discussion. Jasmine is the Commercial Manager and Research and Development Manager at Consolidated Pastoral Company. Consolidated Pastoral Company is an agri-food business that many of us would be familiar with that own and operate a number of properties across Northern Australia. Jasmine's role is to work with the company's carbon reduction projects alongside the management of the company's R&D projects and procurement of key business inputs. Jasmine is a 2022 Nuffield Scholar, and I'd also like to mention her sponsor who is supporting her journey as a Nuffield Scholar, which is MLA. So thank you for providing Jasmine with this opportunity, and thank you, Jasmine, for joining us today. I'll now hand it over to you and you can take it away with our amazing panel. Thanks, Jasmine.
Great, thanks so much, Christy. We have three fantastic panelists joining us today, and all of them have insight and experiences to share with us on adapting to a future with drought and unlocking resilience in rural Australia. As I'm running through this, I've just got a couple of questions as well for everyone attending, so if you're happy to answer some questions there. First up, we have Derek Blomfield. Derek, with his wife Kiralee and their two sons, own and operate a sustainable beef business, The Conscious Farmer. And joining us from South Australia is James Kerr, manager at Buckleboo Station. Drawing on his experience, James looks to share on how a clear plan and vision is crucial to sustaining farm businesses in low rainfall environments. And Rowan Foley. Rowan is the founding CEO of Aboriginal Carbon Foundation. Rowan views carbon neutral or positive commodities like free-range eggs compared to caged eggs. They meet the increasing demand from diverse consumer groups. Carbon is a new agribusiness, and there is an opportunity to integrate this into our businesses. And just for some brief housekeeping, we'll have our panelist discussion for the first 40 minutes, and then we'll share with the audience the questions that you've sent through the Q&A. So as Christy mentioned, please keep these coming through the Q&A portal. So first up, just to help us set a bit of a scene for the discussion, I just thought I'd run through with each of you where you're based, and I guess just briefly describe the landscape that you're operating in. So we might start with you, James. Where's Buckleboo and what's the landscape like there?
Buckalboo Station is just 54 kilometres northwest of Kimber in South Australia. The station is about 986 square kilometres or 250,000 acres. We have a 100-year average rainfall of about 322 at the southern end of the station, and it drops back to about 280 millimetres at the northern end. The country is typical rangeland country, and we have a mixture of soil types. The pastures are mainly native grasses and blue bush and salt bush. The business we're running here is a sheep business, running Dorper ewes. The carrying capacity is roughly 6,000 to 7,000 ewes. The new numbers have been reduced because of the recent drought, and we're building numbers slowly to allow the country to recover. And currently we have about 7,500 sheep on the station.
Great, thanks for that, James. And how about yourself, Derek? Where's home for you and the Conscious Farmer?
Yeah, hi, Jasmine. So our farm is on the Liverpool Plains in New South Wales, so northern New South Wales, and it's just about exactly 1% of the country that James is managing, 2,500 acres, and we are producing grass-fed beef and grass-fed lamb now as well, with Angus cows and Dorper ewes, white Dorper ewes. We also have background some cattle for a local feedlot as well. And our landscape is a mixture of alluvial black vertisoil plains, so cracking self-mulching soils, to some sandstone and basalt ridges with the associated alluvial flow from that. So it's a bit of a diverse landscape and diverse pasture mix in there as well.
Awesome, thank you. And Rowan, whereabouts, I guess, is home for you? And then also, what kind of landscape is the Aboriginal Carbon Foundation working in?
Oh, g'day, Jasmine. I'm in Alice Springs. It's very wet. We've had over 80 mils of rain in the last 24 hours. The Todd River is flowing. It's very green here at the moment. So it's a wet desert. Yeah, and we've got offices in Cairns and Sydney and Alice Springs, so all over the place.
Great, thank you. Certainly sharing in your wet sentiments at the moment as well. We're very excited to see some rain on our northern properties. It's a great thing to see. So to kick off, James, wanted to start with you. When we talk about drought preparedness, something that I find really quite impactful was how you were actually able to generate some landscape change and make your drought preparedness plans at Buckalboo whilst also still being in a drought. Would you mind please talking through what you needed to do to be able to do this?
Thank you, Jasmine. A number of years ago, I read a statement: droughts don't cause bare ground causes drought. At the time, I didn't really believe it, but this statement is true. Bare ground is the main cause of soil degradation, loss of carbon, loss of organic matter, loss of hydration, to just name a few. And I feel that a healthy soil is the key ingredient to landscape resilience and sustainability. So I felt that we were witnessing desertification and action was required immediately. And I'd just like to put up slide 4, if we could, just to demonstrate how bad the property was. Just wait a moment for slide 4 to come up. It's slide 5, if we just go back to slide 4. So the photo on the left was how this property looked in 2 years ago on the 10th of February 2020. It was bare ground and it really just doesn't get much worse than that. The photo on the right was taken about a week ago. And so the decision for us to, and if we just quickly put up slide 5, just as an overview. Sorry, just this little delay, but it just helps explain why we jumped in. And so this is a satellite imagery of the station, of a section of the station that I was really concerned about. On the left, you can see February the 10th, 2020. and we had a lot of bare ground. It was really pretty scary. And the image on the right it was a week ago. And so there's been a massive change in the vegetation across the station in just 2 years. So thank you for putting those slides up. What I just wanted to continue saying was that in the last 2 years, we've only had our average annual rainfall and the 100-year long-term average. So the decision to start whilst in drought conditions was to try and have the process happening so that when the rain came, the country would recover quicker. We didn't have enough internal fencing to secure our dorpers, but we did have a new fence that splits the property north-south. So there was an old 6-wire fence that we patched up so that we could control this new grazing management process. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And since then, we've put in 20 kilometres more of internal fencing from a grant assistance from Landscapes South Australia Building Pastoral Sustainability Program. And this grant was greatly appreciated, and it enabled us to fast track that new grazing management program.
Yeah, great, thank you. I guess it's really quite a stark example there with those images as well. That certainly tells quite the story for us, doesn't it?
Yes, it did.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. We'll go across to you now, Derek. So 2019 was a drought year for you, and then also late last year, your region experienced a flood event. Would you mind please just describing what you observed during this time and how your farm has been able to respond to those events?
Yeah, it's very interesting for us because we've sort of been on this path, you know, what we're all calling regenerative ag now, and things for about 20 years. And it really took a long time for us to really understand, I guess, whether we were hitting some markers or not. And yeah, so 2017, dry leading into the drought for us of 2018, 19, and they were shockers for this region, as a lot of Australia. And we noticed, particularly at the end of that period, you know, all of the black soil plains around here where everyone's growing grain were bare. There were no crops being grown. Stubble had been mulched into the soil and had disappeared. And when we were seeing high wind and things during that time, like you do in drought, we're seeing dust coming off the black soil plains, which you just don't see around here. And it was raising off like white smoke. And our country was also bare. You know, we'd run out of residue. We'd just run out of growing plants. But it held. We weren't getting dust storms blowing off that area. And that was really interesting to observe. And then roll it forward 2 years, and we've had 2 amazing years of gentle rain effectively. And at the end of just this last year, there was pretty significant floods in the Namoy Valley here. And the, you know, Mookai River right near us was exceptionally high. A lot of debris flowing down, a lot of water everywhere. And we were having really good infiltration here, no damage. Our water was running clear through the farm. And it's just really lovely to see it. It was resilient. So during that extremely dry period, it was resilient. And coming out of that and then going into a period where it did finally flood, and it took 2 years of good rain to get to that point. And it did finally flood, and it still held up really well. And then what hit home to us was very recently, you know, there's a lot of cropping all around us. And so, you know, it's been 6 weeks prior, we had too much rain and flooding. And then we got to a point where some of those crops were at risk of the head not, you know, grain sorghum, head not coming out properly and not filling. And I just think, how have we got to that point in ag where our soils just aren't resilient? They're not holding up, and that's what we need to do. And it's just an interesting observation coming through those extremes. You know, we go from extreme drought to extremely wet, and within a short period, 2 sufferings. And yeah, it was significant for us to see.
Yeah, great.
I think that's answered the question.
No, it does. Thank you. Definitely does. It's like you kind of described. It's a bit of an extreme example of how landscape can be resilient, no matter what comes towards it.
Yeah, that's right. And that's not to, you know, put wind in our own sails. It's just that path we've been on, and then And then when we were pushed to, I guess, those extremes, we just noticed what the landscape can do. And that's the base that it will have come from a long time ago. And yeah, we've been under management systems across Australia that maybe haven't been the best for the landscape. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Rowan, we'll go across to you now. So something that I wanted to chat with you about, I guess, was the work that the Aboriginal Carbon Foundation is doing. So that foundation is implementing carbon projects that demonstrate environmental, social, and also cultural benefits. Would you mind please describing to us what these projects look like?
Well, I suppose it's healthy country. There's been a 50% reduction in bushfires in Cape York. That's been scientifically proven. So in Cape York, we're getting rid of all the big wildfires that are coming through and destroying a lot of properties. If you said that in New South Wales, there's a 50% reduction in bushfires, I think people would fall off their chair. The reason why there's been a reduction of bushfires in Cape York is because of carbon farming. So there's a lot more properties that reap the benefits of less bushfires. So you're looking at those environmental and social and cultural values. The social values, jobs for locals, businesses benefiting, communities benefiting. This holy draw, when people talk to me about these things and it's all about money and carbon credits, I just hang up on them. I just shut it down straight away. I say, mate, if that's what you're chasing, it's a short-term outcome you're looking for. But if you want to look after the place and you want to, make a contribution, you're probably going to be around for the long haul. And we'll be interested in talking to you. So, it looks a good carbon project looks like a healthy property.
Sorry, I think we may have just slightly lost you, breaking up a little bit there at the end, Rowan. So it definitely just sounds like the emphasis there is around that a good carbon project is also good for country. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, it's exactly the same as running a cattle station. That you run a property to maintain the property, and if you do it well, you'll make a profit. If your driver is to simply make money, you'll probably drive the property into the ground. But if your aim is to hand on the property to the next generation and to improve the property, then you'll probably make a profit, and a sustainable profit. So it's about the long term.
Yeah. No, great, thank you very much. And I guess that view on long term is probably a good segue to my next question for you, actually, James. And I guess it's around that planning piece. So from your experience, it's really evident that a detailed plan is critical for business and landscape resilience, along with sustainability and drought preparedness. So what does this plan look like to you?
Thank you, Jasmine. This is a very important question. In regards to Buckaboo Station, our plan for drought resilience involved water security, grazing management, diversity of income streams, productivity and efficiencies, livestock quality, the homestead compound, and employees. So the plan that we drafted addressed all of those key areas, but after engaging the services of Contour Consulting, we now have an ecologically sustainable rangelands management plan, and this plan now includes climate, vegetation and diversity, threatening landscape processes such as erosion, grazing management and alternative enterprises. We looked at the carbon farming, tourism. We have a deposit on our property which will be mined probably in a few years. So we looked at all of those things as alternative enterprises within the boundaries of the property. The grazing history of this station is set stocking, And this led to a severe decline in our better quality native grasses. So we're very focused on regenerating the grasslands and the bush country. That's the focus of what we're doing. And the increase in biodiversity and ground cover to build up soil health and rehydrate the soils is really central to all our planning. An interesting fact that for every 1% increase in soil organic matter, we sequester 8.5 tonnes per acre of atmospheric carbon. Huge. To focus will allow our large carbon farming project that has recently been approved on Buckaboo Station, and it covers a large area of the property. So with careful management, we wish to ensure that this project will be a success and provide us with an excellent source of income to offset the effects of future droughts. But it's a win-win scenario also for the long-term sustainability of the landscape. What we've done is we've split the property into 6 key grazing areas, and I graze each area for 3 months, and then it gets about 10 or 11 months spell and complete rest. Nothing on that country at all. We will have to invest in more internal fencing to ensure that better grazing control into the future, and to work closely with the carbon project. In order to protect our ground cover and vegetation, we're going to construct a containment feeding area this year, and this complex will only be used to protect our ground cover in the future. So when the ground cover is reduced by lack of rainfall, then we'll start making decisions if we're going to take numbers off the country and put them into containment feeding. So why we're going to do that is to protect the country and ensure that when the rain does come, the country recovers a lot quicker. We plan to build this over the next few years. So we'll start this year, and then over a period of time, we'll have the containment feeding lot complex completely finished, ready for the next major drought. We've also used the services of Robert Goulet from New South Wales to use geospatial mapping to locate deep bore water to ensure that we have water security. And we've found a major source of water in an ancient volcano on the property, and we've actually drilled in the crater of that old volcano. And we're about to lay poly pipe and ensure that we've got extra distribution of watering points, so that when we put the sheep in those areas, we can utilise the whole area. That's the central process to our planning.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess what we can see that there's a lot of moving parts within that plan, but they're all leading towards a greater goal, and that's around setting your property up so you're prepared for the conditions that may come towards you.
That's true.
Great, thank you. So Derek, back to you again. I was just curious to know, so the conscious farmer, some people might see it as a bit of a non-traditional route to market. Would you mind just describing what you're achieving at the Conscious Farmer and what led you to taking this approach?
Yeah, sure. I guess it's a name that was born out of what we were doing on the farm, and traditionally we had been just doing basically what everyone else does, getting a market price for our produce, and we weren't producing it in a way that we wanted to just get a basic commodity price for it, and we valued what we were producing, and it was feeding us and nourishing us, and we thought there'd be a better way to market that. So we began selling it to the private consumer, and what led us to that point was, I guess, effectively that we've been just changing how we were producing things on the farm, and we had moved, and we've really only recently recognised this, but being able to stand back from it. But we'd moved from killing everything, that kill agriculture sort of focus, to where you're protecting crops and you're killing weeds and you're killing parasites and all of that stuff, to a living agriculture. So, we were promoting a lot like what James was talking about. We're promoting more grasses, more shrubs, more trees on the farm, more life on the farm, and it's led to healthier animals. We're not treating for worms, we're not treating for lice, we're not treating for anything, and our animals are healthier than they ever were. And we know it's just the diversity of species that they get to eat. And the only way that's come about is by us focusing our management on letting those plant species recover and recover well. And that James is referring to that time, that rest period, and it's so critical for plants. And in all of these different environments across Australia, and I know seeing a lot of the people, attendees saying hi there, we're spread across the whole nation, and even someone I saw from Iowa in the States. So those landscapes vary across the nation, across the globe, and there are just fickle little complexities across all of these landscapes that we as managers of that land need to just be aware of and observe and allow it to bounce back and be resilient. And that's what led us down to, well, we have a product to sell that has a difference, and we can discuss that further, that those customers then have just that filtration system have found us.
Yeah, that's great. I guess, the piece there around, working with your unique landscape that you've been able to integrate, and having a product that you really love and stand by, and wanting to make sure that that's being reflected as well. That's great. Yeah. So Rowan, you've previously described, and I guess it's a bit of a similar theme here as well. You've previously described that carbon is actually a part of the landscape and land stewardship. Would you mind just also, I guess, going a little bit more detail of what this actually looks like when we particularly think about, say, when we're standing in a paddock or in a field?
Sure. Well, I think that James's first slide was probably what I drew on there, is that, you saw one slide there and there wasn't much carbon, and you saw another slide there and there was a lot of carbon. So, I don't think you need to be a genius to figure that one out. But I sort of want to touch on, is it Dean, my fellow presenter? Derek, sorry. Derek. Look, if you're selling a commodity in the marketplace, and I suppose this is the thing, you can, like, the carbon credits are an agricultural commodity just like everything else. People, you just got to apply common sense. So if you go down to the market and you're selling another agricultural product, eggs, this with the intro, and they come from a cage and the bargain basement, you'll see that their price is very low. You'll see that the price for eggs that are very high are the ones that are free range from an Australian farm, probably organic, and you'll see that the price that they are charging is much, much higher than the price for, battery hens where the eggs come out of cages. It's the same, they're both eggs, but it's the way that they will produce that people are willing to pay more for. It's exactly the same with carbon credits. You can sell a bargain basement carbon credit and people will buy them, or you can add value to them. And that's the environmental, social and cultural values that come along, and you can get higher prices. So, there's no, just apply common sense. And this is one of the great things in the carbon industry. This is one of my little bugbears, is that the one thing that people do not apply is common sense in this agribusiness. Because the first thing that you'd be doing, if you want to, you'd be trying to add value to your product in the marketplace. That's the common sense thing to do. So, which means you've got to do a little bit more work. That's the other thing. People think that you can sit back, do nothing, and charge higher prices. And the answer is no, you can't. Apply some common sense. If you do the work, you'll get the money, but you've actually got to do the work. And, people are willing to pay for those things. We've been in business now for 12 years. We're actually going international. So, but you've got to do the work and add value to your product. And if you do that, then you'll get the benefits.
Yeah, great, thank you. That actually might that leads probably pretty well into the next question that I actually had with you, Rowan. We might go to that, which is that, I guess, kind of like you've raised there, it is an agribusiness, and that's the opportunity that exists there. So with that, what further opportunities do you see available to other rural communities, and linking through to that, the customer demand as well?
Well, increasingly, a lot of companies are going carbon neutral. Look, the Paris Agreement is not going away. So, you know, whether you like it or not, it's here to stay. You know, the market demand is there. It's increasing. But more so strategically, you know, so look, the domestic market's pretty healthy and it's good, but strategically where Australian agriculture should be positioning itself is in the international markets. So CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, has just been introduced by the EU, which is a carbon tax. You can sit here and whinge about it until the cows come home. It ain't going to change. The EU has a carbon tax. You've got to do something about your carbon footprint, otherwise you will pay more money. Now, if you think it's going to stop at Europe, you're sadly mistaken. North America will adopt it, Asia will adopt it, South America will probably adopt it a bit later on. So you have to do something about your carbon footprint. We've seen the first big move with the EU, and that's where the Australian agriculture can strategically position itself to deal with its carbon footprint, to be carbon neutral, to access these markets. And you know, you don't want to be dragged kicking and screaming to the market. You actually want to be, you know, getting a benefit. You want to be able to outcompete all of your rivals by saying, yeah, we are carbon neutral. Choose us, get your contracts, get the good money. So, you know, that strategically, that's where I think that Australian agriculture, because 80% of our produce is exported, that's where we need to be heading.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for that. I guess while we're on the theme of customers, I might jump back to you, Derek. So you're someone that does have that direct connection to your customers. What are you hearing from them when they consider farming and purchasing in a changing climate?
Yeah, and it does vary because it's a wide group of people, but it's interesting because I just was speaking with a customer this morning and who's been a long-time customer. And so, you know, they're the best kind, the repeat loyal customer. But we found generally that we went into this thinking our customers would be all high-end customers, be high net worth people wanting to spend a lot on the product. And as it turns out, we feel like most of them are mums and dads just wanting to feed their family well, etc. And there's a bit of a common theme. And this lady this morning was saying when they were younger, her and her husband, she said they were effectively broke, but they always chose, just going back to the eggs, they always chose quite particularly which eggs they purchased, wanting to know how they were produced and how the welfare of the animals was, etc. And we're finding that a lot with the customers. A lot of them, it is about the health of the product because they're buying food, so they want to make sure they're feeding their family well. But a commonality amongst much of those people is how it's produced. They want to know, their farmer, but want to know how that land's being looked after, because we've all seen the vision and footage of the countryside in drought and etc. And yeah, there's an increasing awareness of what are you, our farmers, who are managing the landscape on behalf of all of us. What are you doing? How are you doing that? Are you doing it responsibly? A lot of people have said to me, you know, we're trying to reduce our meat consumption, and as a meat producer, you know, there should be alarm bells.
Oh, are you still there, Derek?
Going for me, because what Rowan and James are both putting. I'm here.
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry about that. Keep going.
Back on now. Yeah, well, we're
Yeah.
hearing from James and Rowan, if we do this well, if we manage our landscape well, we're putting carbon back in the soil, back where it belongs. So if we need to be promoting that as an industry, as a sector, to our customers, to have to have faith in us, to be able to produce a product well on their behalf and for them, that we can be storing carbon back in the soil, rather than it just being a bad news story that animals produce methane, that's destroying our climate. So yeah, it's a bit of an interaction, and we discussed the other day, Jasmine, that we as producers often comment that people don't know where their food comes from, and we as producers often don't know where our food goes to. And once we make that link with them, we can have those conversations at an eye to eye level to explain what it is we do. And when we're doing something well, then the customers and the people out there need to know, so that they can have faith and confidence in what we're doing. Because as Rowan said, Paris isn't going away. We can well see a time where meat consumption is potentially quoted, and we need to make sure that we're able to manage landscapes, and the best way to do that, if we're using animals in our system, is to do it well and let plants recover and let more plants actually be living in the soil.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. It's a good point. I guess not only is the Paris Agreement not going away, but also just generally the climate cycle is also not going away. So that's great. Thanks, Derek. We'll go across to you now, James, for our final question before we go into audience Q&A. I think this is a good way to kind of close it out as well. But when we talk about being adaptable and resilient when responding to climate, what does it mean to you to be adaptable and resilient in ag, not just in a business, but also as an individual?
Again, it's a very good question. I mean, I love agriculture. I love working with animals. I love the beauty of nature. And I know the role of farmers is crucial to the future of mankind in providing food and fibre. And one ingredient that makes all this possible is soil. And to me, being adaptable and resilient is the focus on nurturing the soil so that we can pass on productive, vibrant farming businesses to the next generation. There's a lot of talk about climate in the media, and I believe that as farmers, we need to focus on the facts about the long-term history of rainfall and temperatures going back 100 to 150 years minimum. Our land is an island, and the rainfall is much more reliable, closer to the coast, and we are a dry continent, and it's something we have to accept. There's just a couple of slides I just want to share with you. I use these tools. If slide 1 could be put up, please. I mean, I use these tools as a guide, I guess, for longer term planning. And this first chart I want to put up is the sunspot cycle chart going right back to 1700. And one thing that I want you to recognise is that climate is cyclical. It has been for millions of years, and it will continue that way. This particular chart, if you look at the peak in 1956, that was the highest activity of solar activity right back to 320 years. Those 2 years, 1955, 56, were extremely wet years. And what you'll notice is that there's been a 60-year decline in solar activity, going right down to where we are now. So if we put up the next slide, slide 2, there's evidence in this slide that we're looking at solar cycle 25, which as you can see, we're coming out of a dry cycle and we're going into another cycle, which is going to peak in around 2025. And we're getting a lot of rain across Australia at the moment, and we're going through a wet cycle. And this is not perfect, but I use these charts, and I've got a lot of data that supports some of my thoughts on this, that even in a dry climate like this, Buckleboo Station, for instance, back in 1955-56 had 650 millimetres of rainfall. Even in a really dry desert area, we had very high rainfall back in those years. So it looks like the decline is going to continue. In other words, that downward trend in solar activity. So if we just put up the third slide, I just want to go through these quickly because there's not enough time to go in detail, but just the third slide. But just to refer to the bottom slide, if we may, looking at the facts of what's happening with solar activity, there's a very real possibility that we're going into a what's known as a solar minimum period. And if you look back at the last one was 350 years ago, the Mauna minimum. And when you're looking at this long downward trend in solar activity, we could be heading into a grand solar minimum. So what this means is that the opportunity, I believe, would be fantastic for the Southern Hemisphere, because it's the Northern Hemisphere that is usually more affected when you go into a grand solar minimum. The climate up there will be severely cold. And therefore, the Southern Hemisphere will have the opportunity of providing not only the food that we produce now, but having to make up the shortfall if this scenario happens in the Northern Hemisphere. And the crucial period will be 2031 to 2043. That'll be the low point in that period. But the greatest challenge to the Southern Hemisphere will be the fact that anytime when you have a long period of cold, you'll also have low rainfall, sort of like lower than average. Those cycles that I showed you before that go back to 1700, they will continue, but there's a very possibility that it'll be long-term lower than normal rainfall. So we really need to step up to meet those challenges. If that occurs, I'm saying it's a possibility. And it just disturbs me that there's not enough focus on this, because there's a lot more people on Earth. That grand solar minimum was 1645 to 1715. There's millions more people on Earth today than there was back then. So it's going to be really crucial that we recognise that this might play out, and we need to be ready for it. So I'm just thinking that good planning leads to being organised and control of the situation, and enables you to make unemotional decisions. And I guess in looking at this resilience argument is that we all tend to work too hard during drought years. And I think it's very important to look after your mental state as well. So the looking after yourselves should be also very central to any plans that you do in preparing for droughts.
No, that's great. Thank you. I guess it really kind of re-emphasises the few points that you've had through this discussion is that planning piece is critical to building your business and your own resilience. So I'll jump into some audience questions now, if we wouldn't mind also closing down that slide. We've had a few come through, which is great. Thank you, everyone. So a first question that has come through from Melanie Shannon. She just mentions, incredible work, well done. And I'm assuming that's referring to the work you've been able to do at Buckleboo. What initial actions did you take to build ground cover?
This is absolutely crucial to me. Is what I was explaining before in my presentation is that when we decided to start doing something about it was spelling the country that was most affected. We just took the stock off it. And in fact, we've only had in that big area that I showed in that satellite earlier, there's the southern end of the station, that was looking like a moonscape. It was, you know, when we had a really windy day, you could see like a sand dunes moving, you know, rippling effect on the ground. I call that desertification. It doesn't get much worse than that. So I made the decision to destock that area and just allow whatever rainfall fell to start that process. What I've witnessed across the station, and we have only had average rainfall last 2 years, and the 2 years before that were well below average. The ground cover is starting to build up, and it's very exciting. I can't stress that enough. I believe in a mix of biodiversity. Weeds have their place. They are almost central to invigorating the soil, because they put down tap roots, They've got this resiliency, you know, what do you call it, leathery type leaves that are unpalatable to stock. And so I'm just encouraging everything to grow because I feel it's part of the biodiversity. It's there for a reason. I sincerely hope that within 5 years, you know, we go through this cycle that's going to be like what I call a wet cycle. Then by only grazing the property, the areas for 3 months and giving them 11 or 12 months spell, we're giving the country every chance to build up that ground cover, because it's over time. My aim and my goal is not to see any bare ground. I know that's probably a fairly tall, you know, goal to set for such a low rainfall area, but the reality is that if we can get that goal and not have any bare ground, my focus after that will be to ensure that we protect that. And I think then we will have a very healthy, resilient soil and long-term sustainability. That's what we're wishing to achieve.
Great, thank you. I'll open this up for all panelists, so please, hopefully we can get it through okay, but jump in if you've got an answer for us. This question comes from Troy Klepp, and he's asking if there are any simple tools or models that are available to help calculate one's carbon footprint.
Yeah, there's heaps of carbon calculators on the internet to calculate your carbon footprints. Just Google it. Just type in carbon calculator and you'll come up with about 20 different carbon calculators.
Thank you. Another query for you, James, and you have answered this in the portal, but I think it might be worthwhile opening this up for the wider audience as well. Question that came through from Alexandra Mitchell was, how do banks embrace extended funding for the changes in your infrastructure, and was it hard to convince them?
In our case, I'm very fortunate to be working with a company that reinvests back into the business all the time. That's the central focus of how the company does business. So across all of our pastoral stations, we reinvest as much of the income as we possibly can back into the station. So it's looking into for the long haul, long term, and that's allowing us to do a lot of this work without securing extra funding from the bank. So the one point that I want to make on this though is that I personally believe that if you've got a very good business plan, you should share that with your bank. Don't assume that they understand where you are and where you want to get to. I think it's absolutely important that if you develop a business plan, and look, I mean, I'm happy to show it up. There's the business plan for Buckalboo. It's 110 pages, and it's a very detailed plan. If you develop something along that nature, then I think that you should share that with your bank. Take it in, sit down with them, and be very clear that you recognise that you've got some problems on your property and that you want to fix them. To me, that's just the starting point. You can't expect everyone to assume that they understand your business. And I think it's the greatest challenge for all to get out there, develop that plan. And I actually encourage farmers and farming businesses to use facilitators to come in and guide them in putting that plan together. You know, it's very difficult when you've got some strong personalities in a family farming business, and it means that everybody's not involved in the process, and that's crucial. If you want ownership of a plan of where you are today and where you want to get to, it's critically important to involve everybody in that planning process, and that is also your advisors, your accountants, and your banks, and so forth. So I just really believe that if you can't, if you don't believe you've got the skills within the team, get an independent facilitator to come in, help you put that plan together, and then share it with your banks. And I think that's just absolutely crucial as we move forward in the future.
Great, thanks for that, James. We've got one for you, Derek, now as well. What are the leadership challenges that you have in driving the adoption of, I guess, that regenerative ag on your property? And they're also keen to see both within your enterprise and across your industry.
Yeah, I saw that question, and it's a good one. For us, it was okay because it was a transition within the family to Kirrily and myself. So, you know, the business side of things became ours to manage and make those decisions. So we're on the same page, so we could do that to move in that direction we wanted to move. However, I did find that more challenging because we were making, you know, what I considered at the time major and drastic changes, and which I now don't. And you know, there was road frontage, paddocks, and neighbours, and all of that sort of thing. So personally, there were some great challenges because we were effectively pulling the plug on the systems we were employing previously, and it didn't look pretty. James referred to weeds have their place. Well, the word must have got out because they had their place on our place very early on there, and that was really challenging for me. So yeah, as a leader in the business, it's, you know, you're making those decisions. You've got to back yourself. As someone recently sort of, I guess, said to us that you really have to know yourself, and that was challenging for me at the time. And then to do that in an industry, so to be doing what we're doing, you know, as you said earlier, it's different to how mainstream agriculture sells its wares, and how we're producing it. You know, it's been in media publications and things before, and so you're sticking out. And I don't know, I guess getting people around you, getting involved. You know, we come through the holistic management process, so there are people you can turn to help you. You know, if you're getting stuck, if you're not feeling great about something, there are people you can turn to just keep you on track, and people that are also seeking, that have questions, because we all sort of come to these things. I'm sure at Buckleby is the same sort of thing. Something's not right here, you know, this shouldn't be happening, and what do we need to do to fix it? And you have questions and you go seeking information, and it sort of leads you through doorways, and then you just keep going. And I hope that's answered the question that was posted. But yeah, those are real concerns. Those are real challenges in business and externally to your farming peers.
No, that's great. Thank you so much, Derek. I think you definitely kind of hit the point there around that there are genuine challenges, and it's about working through it, but also not bearing it all, bringing in people to help where you need it. So we'll go back to you, James, and I guess you may have covered some points on this through your talk, but I guess just to kind of really to send the message home, there's a question that's come through from Alexander Mitchell, and they're asking, what does a carbon farm model actually mean in practice for you?
In practice, the methodology that we're using, I guess you would call, is human-induced regeneration. That's a method where, you know, landholders want to regenerate their native vegetation on the land, and to earn carbon credits. I mean, I probably look at it a little bit broader than that, because what I've been saying earlier is that I want to regenerate the whole station, and by having that focus across the whole station, it's then complementary to work side by side with the carbon project, because the regulators in the carbon project have a strict criteria, and it's very important that, you know, it's a long-term project. It's 25 years. I mean, you have to understand that when you enter into a relationship, you know, with a carbon provider, that you need to work together. It's not. And I think Rowan made the point that if you just go in it for a quick dollar, you're going in for the wrong reason. And I believe that the most important thing for us is to have a very strong relationship and understanding with our carbon provider. But personally, I see it as it's a reward for regenerating the landscape. The focus on us is not just the measurable trees that the regulators measure the carbon sequestration over that period of 25 years, but for me, it's the whole station. So I'm looking at trying to regenerate the vegetation across the whole property, build up the ground covers, so that we have a tremendous build-up of biodiversity right across the entire station. And I mean, there's a new fund just been launched or released by the Australian government, which is called the Biodiversity Fund. And that's something that interests me as well, because to me, if you do the job well, then you're rewarded by it, okay, financially, but it's about long-term sustainability. And I just think that it's a very important step that in rangelands area and indeed probably right across Australia, that if we focused on the soils, we focused on soil health, then that changes a lot. And I can't really explain it much better than that.
No, that's great. Thanks so much, James. I'll just have one final closeout question, I think, for Derek, and was just kind of keen to look at in your landscape, the focus has been on regenerating the landscape and also biodiversity, but have you seen anything else that has also occurred through that journey?
Yeah, we have. I guess in ourselves, your level of observance. I mean, you're either kind of an observant person or you're not, but you start noticing more and more and more. So, and when you're noticing more, you're able to solve problems. We used to outsource all of that stuff, oh, this plant's growing, what is it? Oh, how do we kill it? And it get someone in to advise on all those things. And even animal health stuff now, we if we're really unsure about something, we'll get some advice, but doesn't mean we're following it. We look more to, okay, what can we do? What's gone on here? What are the steps that have happened before this event, this thing, and how do we remedy it? So we sort of move from, you transition into a bit more of an inquiring, observing mindset. But I guess it took a long time. Initially you notice, oh, there's more grass in that paddock than there used to be. Oh, it's not as capped, it's more loose, and that type of thing. But it's like nature. It's very, very complex. So you start seeing all of those complexities. So I guess there's no clear answer to that question, in that it just is this big. Biodiversity isn't pretty, and it's confusing and messy, and you kind of just start to notice that, and that's what you see. So yeah, you're healing the landscape, you're seeing those improvements and things, but and I'm not scientific, so I'm not out there monitoring and documenting everything. You just start seeing this change, and it's hard to sort of box it. It's just a very complex thing, which can only be a positive thing, because we have to, adapting to a changing climate and taking advantage of that, we have to be able to bend with it and work with it, what we're given. We're in cycles of decline, we're in cycles of increase, and we have to have that flexibility and dynamics in our businesses and ourselves to be able to see and work with that. I guess that's some of the stuff that we notice, as well as those things happening in the paddock.
That's great. Thank you so much. That's all the time we've got now for the questions. Thank you. And I guess just a great thank you to everyone who was able to join from the audience, but also particularly to our panelists for making the time to talk to us today. So thank you very much, Rowan, Derek and James. We certainly really appreciate being able to share some of your experiences and messages when we look at being able to adapt to a future with the drought and being able to be resilient. And I guess the really great point that I've taken away from this is, you know, it's a plan, it's not a short plan, it's a journey, and we've got to certainly be in here for the long haul, because that certainly is what the future is. So again, thank you again for your time, and thank you very much to the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation and the National Farmers Federation as well for being able to support this forum. It's been a great session. Thank you.
Thanks, Jasmine, and thank you for facilitating today's webinar, and also to our special guests, James, Rowan and Derek, for your time and contribution to today's discussion. It has been so interesting. It's wonderful to hear perspectives from all of you, people who are so passionate about not only your own operations, but also the long-term sustainability of ag. Great to hear your insights on preparation and planning and the practical measures that you're taking for the future. So thank you all for participating. Thanks again, ARLF, our Drought Resilient Leaders program partners, and the Australian Government's Future Drought Fund for supporting this program. For those who are online today, I wanted to let you know quickly that applications are open currently for the Drought Resilience Leaders Development Program. They're open until the 4th of March for people in Southwest Queensland, the Northern Territory and Tasmania. And the mentoring program, which James is a mentor in, will be opening up for application for one more round for people who are involved in ag from anywhere in Australia. So I really encourage you to check those programs out. And if they're right for you, consider applying. They're a great opportunity to contribute and also work with others who are just as passionate about ag. Please check out the Australian Rural Leadership Foundation's website for all of the details on those programs, and also for information about the next session of the Drought Resilience Leaders webinar series, like this one, which takes place on the 24th of February. The recording from today's session will be on our YouTube channel, where you can search Australian Rural Leadership Foundation to see today's recording and also past webinars from the series. You will receive an email with the link to watch a replay. And just as you leave the session, there will be a survey. We would love to hear your feedback. We really appreciate hearing from you about what you'd like to see us do in the future. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Hayley, for your support. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Have a great afternoon.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.